Peter Ladhams, you just went bang yesterday. Finally, we've been tiptoeing around it. You said, nah, he's requested a trade to Sydney finally. Take us through that.
Yeah, he's told Port Adelaide over the weekend that he wants that move. I think Port had initially put it on the radar and said that he should explore his opportunities. He spent the first part of the trade period just weighing up exactly what he wanted to do. He sort of surveyed the market. He met with Hawthorn and Sydney about a fortnight ago. He considered going back to the Power, but I think both parties, or all three parties, including Sydney, are pretty adamant they want this trade to get done. So Port and Sydney have had some preliminary chats late last week about what a potential trade could look like, and Ladhams has given an indication to the Power now that it is something he wants. So just given the way that every party sort of wants this to get done, I'd expect it to go through by Wednesday's deadline. There's still going to be a bit of haggling over his value, I reckon, but it's certainly one to put on the radar ahead of 7:30 tomorrow night.
And the Ruck stuff, I mean, that's pivotal to it as well, but also Lynch deciding that he wants to go to Hawthorn from Collingwood. I mean, where does that leave Jonathan Ceglar, and where will he play? Do the Western Bulldogs do anything? Where does Geelong sit? And Brisbane also in the mix for a Ruck.
Yeah, I think this sort of is dependent on Geelong, I think. If they're willing to accept a deal from Brisbane for Darcy Fort, and there's been a bit of haggling there over later picks and what he could potentially be worth. He's another player that's contracted, so the Cats have to come to a suitable agreement with the Lions over a trade there. If Darcy Fort gets to Brisbane, then I'd expect Jon Ceglar to get to Geelong. I think something's already been worked out there with his contract, so I'd anticipate that going through. I think Hawthorn's willing to pay a portion of his salary for him to get there. And then Max Lynch, of course, Graham Wright saying last night that he'd officially requested a trade to Hawthorn, so that should get done. And if that gets done, I mean, where does it leave Mason Cox? He's a player without a contract offer at the moment, but has sort of surveyed his options, didn't have much interest out there. I'd almost anticipate now if Max Lynch goes for him to get a short-term deal to stay at Collingwood.
I think that would be the case as well. It's just whether they've spoken a bit about it on Trade Radio. He's probably coming off probably $500,000 contract, Mason Cox. I reckon around that anyway. Is he prepared to play on a rookie deal, or certainly a base deal would be over to him? But I think Collingwood's needs suggest that if Lynch goes, the Cox has a spot on their list. What else can we expect today? Jordan Dawson, Bobby Hill and Hawthorn, always topical, and those first two haven't found a home yet. Do you think they will? Let's start with Dawson.
Dawson, yes. I think he eventually gets to Adelaide. I think a deal has to get worked out here. As we reported on AFL.com.au last night, the Crows have offered Melbourne's future first-round pick, which they got in return for a pick swap earlier last week. For me, I mean, going into this year's trade period, we thought that Port Adelaide's pick 16 would get a deal done had he have nominated Port Adelaide. So I think that's probably what Melbourne's first round pick. You probably have to anticipate it's going to be in that 15 to 20 region. If we thought 16 gets done, does Sydney maybe accept that? Do they want a little bit more? Can they negotiate maybe a later pick to go along with that? If it's, I mean, Adelaide don't have any this year, but do they have any future picks they could potentially offer up? They've got their first, second and third round picks next year as well. So maybe they can offer a future second or third to get that done. I'm not sure how that gets over the line at the moment. Bobby Hill's going to be an interesting one because the Giants seem pretty adamant that they want to keep him. He's obviously contracted, and they're saying that, look, Essendon has to stump up exactly what it wants to get a trade done. So that's going to be fascinating. Another, just a little interesting one that I think is bubbling away in the background, but I'm going to find it fascinating to see if a deal gets done by tomorrow night, is Tristan Xerri to St Kilda. So we reported last night on AFL.com.au that North Melbourne had asked for a future second rounder for Tristan Xerri, and that had been swiftly rejected by the Saints. I think there's a fair difference in valuation between how St Kilda values him and how North Melbourne values him. Kangaroos have the whip hand here, though, because he's contracted. So he's a player that's requested a trade to St Kilda. I just, at the moment, find it difficult to see how a deal gets done unless North Melbourne relents on its asking price, which Brady Rawlings, speaking yesterday, didn't sound like he was going to. So I think that's going to be another interesting one to watch.
A few Western Bulldogs fans just going, what's going on with our ruck situation? Channel 7 and your man Mitch Cleary reporting that Stephen Martin and that contract is done. Tim English is there, but it didn't get it done in the finals, and Stephen Martin is what, 33, 34 years of age, and we thought maybe Ceglar would go there for backup. That's not going to happen, as you've explained, so they may be a little bit thin as well.
Yeah, look, I mean, I wonder if they thought about getting involved in this sort of ruck race that's happening at the moment. Maybe they thought about someone like a Max Lynch or a Kieran Briggs. I don't think that ever crossed their radar. I think that would have come onto their agenda had they lost Jordon Sweet to West Coast. Had a bit of interest from the Eagles, who are chasing ruck depth themselves. I think they're quite keen to go in a different direction though, the Eagles, and look towards maybe a delisted free agent or someone in the rookie draft, a mature age player from a state league. But as for the Dogs, they've managed to re-sign Jordon Sweet. Now, he was kept out of their first 2 finals for Lewis Young, who of course moves to Carlton this trade period. So I think there's going to be more opportunity in the future for Jordon Sweet, and they're pretty confident that he can step up and make that leap into senior football and play on a pretty consistent basis behind Steph Martin next year. I think we'll see more Steph Martin, obviously, if he has a better run with injury. I think we'll see more Jordon Sweet, and I think we might see more Tim English in the ruck as well. So I think the Dogs are pretty comfortable with where their ruck stocks sit at the moment. Of course, Steph Martin probably going to be his last year in 2022, you'd have to think. So, I mean, I think it'll be something that comes up on their radar, but maybe not for another 12 months.
All right. Now, Bobby Hill, will he, is it Essendon? Is it Collingwood? Is it the Giants?
I think it's the Giants at the end of the day. I mean, It's funny, we spoke at length yesterday about how all of a sudden the Giants were holding all the cards in the trade period. They had Lobb on the go, they had Wingard on the go, they had Bobby Hill leaving the club. I mean, it wouldn't shock me if by Wednesday, 7:30pm, none of those players have moved. And Bobby Hill stays at the Giants where he's contracted for 2022. Lobb stays at the Dockers where he's contracted, and Wingard stays at Hawthorn where he's contracted. So from going towards being the big players of the last 48 hours of the trade period, maybe there might not be more movement. I'd expect Essendon to come back, but just given the way that negotiations have started and given the way that there was a bit of agitation last year after the Jai Caldwell deal, I'm just not sure if anything gets done there. I don't think he's a player that the Giants want to lose. So I think Essendon would have to stump up a pretty hefty asking price. And at the moment, unless it's 51, I don't think the Bombers are willing to go any further than that. So I think there's a fair bit to play out here.
All right, last one before we go, because the Cats fans are wondering, does Jordan Clark get to a destination today? Surely that one, it looks pretty simple to me, doesn't it? What are they arguing over 3 slots in the draft, are they, between 19 and 22? So
there's 2 options on the table. The Cats want pick 19. The Dockers have said that's not available and that they'll give them pick 22. And the Cats have said, well, if we get pick 22, we also want the future 3rd round pick you got from Carlton in the Adam Chera trade. So a bit to play out here. This is one where I think the differences are so minute that by 7:30 Wednesday we get a deal. Maybe even by 5 p.m. today we get a deal, because there's just not that much difference between the asking price. It's like the Adam Sard situation last year where they spent the entire trade period haggling over, I think it was pick 48, and whether or not pick 48 would be included in the deal. I think at the end of the day, when you want the player, you just get the deal done. So
he's contracted, isn't he?
He is contracted, but I can't see 3 picks. I mean, at the end of the day, I can't see 3 picks stopping Fremantle from doing the deal. So I think it will get done eventually. It's just what Geelong's sort of willing to accept, because I think at the end of the day, if they take pick 22, and I think Fremantle probably prefer to take the second deal that I mentioned there, 22 and a future 3rd as opposed to 19, because I think they're pretty keen on keeping that top 20 pick.